even banking and smart cities. Yeah, so we are glad to see these various teams and sectors being addressed by our young innovators out there, especially those from the African Robotics Network that takes STEM education to schools and encourage the building of skills to solve some of these real life problems that we have in Africa. Yeah, but at this stage, I would like to also have us look at how much of business opportunities lie in these innovations. And at this point, I would love to bring in Mazio Nyanyo from Ghana. Mazio, you are a business consultant. You are also an entrepreneur, and believe you have so much experience in the field of tech business, and also in building and advising small and medium, small and micro and small businesses up to scale. So, Mazio, you've heard so far what our speakers have been saying about robots in Africa, how robots are being developed to address one sector or the other. But I'd like to ask you, what potentials do you see in the development of robots as related to the development of businesses in Africa? Yeah, how much of these innovations in robotics can we actually translate into businesses in Africa?
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity. I was really happy to listen to the guys that came before. Amazing work and amazing thoughts out there. I think that, as with everything, Africa is like a virgin land with lots of beautiful opportunities abounding in minerals and resources. So robotics definitely has a great potential and impact in Africa. We've got the human resource, and I would like to say that we've got the talent also, Kelly. There's a lot of people that are taking advantage of learning online or just, hustling and getting it done. So in terms of business, there's a lot of opportunities, but like Kelly also mentioned, we have to think about the infrastructure, right? So the first time I deployed my app in a rural area, I was like, oh, this is going to be amazing. And they have 2G network. Now, that doesn't mean my app is not amazing. That doesn't mean that it doesn't work, but it doesn't load because there's too many things for the infrastructure to be able to carry it. So we have to look in terms of across Africa, what's the infrastructure? What do we have? And then which parts of, I like the way you say automation, which parts of automation can we implement? I would like to cite an example with GD Trust. So right now at GD Trust, what we are doing is that we're teaching micro and small businesses how to manage their businesses better, price their goods, get online, and manage their records, do savings, get access to flexible microcredit, right? Now, we're also exploring ways in which we can, from the data that they're using, the data that we gain from them learning and them doing their bookkeeping, be able to give them a credit score, a credit scoring profile. And this is AI and this is data analytics, right? And so this is directly looking for a problem and then finding a solution. You're solving the problem, but you use the technology to solve the problem. So you don't bring the technology and try to force it on the people. You try and find something that they're already dealing with and then how the technology can fit in, right? So this way they need access to finance, they need access to flexible credit, lower interest rates. And you realize that creditors do not give access to credit to these segments because they say they're a huge financial risk, they can't document them. So we're documenting them, literally, right? And then thereby de-risking them and then giving them access to finance. I mean, yes, there's a lot of business opportunities with this. For example, we do our content in only the local language. Now we're looking at ways to use natural language processing to then translate this into so many other languages that could scale across Africa, right? So you look at the problem and then you find the solution. It's just like, I forget your name before, the guy in the really nice African print. with his street artists, and then adding some robotics on that. When was it? Ah, yeah. Okay, Ralph. I met a group of entrepreneurs, I think a few days ago, and what they have is an AI scarecrow, right? Which is just a bird or bird of prey or hawk built from metals, and then it's flying. And okay, Ralph. I met a group of. I'm hearing feedback. Is it okay?
Go ahead. Go on.
All right, so this AI scarecrow, what it does is it flies over the farm. It has this high-pitched sound that scares the birds, and this is very useful, right? But the thing is that she won't get funded. Well, like I've seen her up and I've seen her go around, but she's finding it hard really to explain to funders that are outside of Africa, outside of Ghana, what the real importance of this AI scarecrow is. Right, but a lot of farmers lose a lot of their harvest, especially rice farmers. The birds eat the rice before it's harvest time, and you have nothing. You spend how many months, and you literally harvest nothing. It is a human process. I'm sure we'll get to this about how robotics may take the jobs away from locals. But so I tell you a personal story also. When I was a young girl, 9, 10, my father had 10 rice farms. So as is the culture in Ghana, and I don't know in any other countries, as the eldest daughter, I was the farm manager, de facto. There's no way you don't go to the farm as the eldest child. So I did a lot of that scaring of birds, and it made me late for school all the time. I saw some of my other classmates drop out of school to just, do the farm. So this has a lot of application and solves a more macro problem, reducing child labor on the farm, making sure that I have access to education and I can speak at a place like this now, right? So that's the thing. We need to recognize, despite the hype and the beauty of all of the technology, we should make sure that we're solving real problems. And when you find a real problem, there's so many ways in which robotics, automation, especially in the African sense, could be made into like a really large opportunity. I don't want to talk too much. I talk a lot.
Oh, all right, Mazio. You've said a lot that needs to be unpacked, but then along the line, you also mentioned something that we definitely will have to come around to talking about, which is the issue of jobs, because it is definitely one of those elephants in the room. Okay, so and we're going to be talking about it right now. And now, in an underdeveloped region like Africa, with so many countries struggling with high rates of unemployment, it's very, very usual to come across comments like these robots are going to take away our already few and scarce jobs. So from your own point of view out there in the field, and from your wealth of experience, do you agree that these robots portend a threat to jobs in Africa, or will they in fact create more jobs?
So I really like this question, because I think that one thing that we need to get over as a people, or just maybe generally everywhere, is not to fear change. Change has always been constant. Like literally people have feared change, and then it comes to hit you in the face, and now you're like, I don't like this technology. All the kids are on tech now. But there's no way we can run away from it. And the thing is, we're having a lot of unemployment issues. There's not enough jobs in the first place. So people should not be worrying about losing jobs. People should be worrying about creating more jobs. That is really what we should look at. Instead of fearing the big guy or this scary monster coming to take away our jobs, how do we do our jobs better first? How do we learn? And how do we make sure that we benefit from this instead? How do we get more job opportunities from this? Like literally, I love tech because it made it easy for me to do a lot of things. Like I could do a program to do my homework, and not have to think about all the math. So it's about all of these things that we need to change the mindset. Change is good, and change is inevitable. That's the first thing. And then how do we make sure that we maximize the opportunities for job creation, knowing that we have a problem with unemployment? So how can we, like, for example, with Ralph and his birds and his spaceship, like, literally, I'm here and I'm like, oh, so that means that kids could learn how to create little cars, have them move around with just a little bit of some capacities and some cheaper equipment, and sell these online or sell these to other people. Do you get it? It's just, you need to think of ways in which you create employment from it. So, and a lot of people, so for example, in Ghana, call centers and a few other things, like we've not even gotten to AI assistants yet, right? There's got to be something that comes before that comes in, right? So this is more job opportunities. You will have a call center now, you hire maybe 100 ladies. Now there's people, that's jobs, right? Now you will have an AI assistant to help people do their transactions, bank transactions online, save digitally, and then be able to start their own small businesses on their own. So I think there'll be so much more discussions from the rest of the panel, but I believe that we need to change the mindset and then also find ways to create opportunities for more jobs, because that is exactly what there is. Like, there's a new open field and we can choose to do with it as we want. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mazio, for addressing one of those pressing and should I say perennial, never going away problems that's bound to come up from, especially Africans, with concern to the advent of robots on the continent. I would like to also now move to another elephant in the room, and for this I'll be bringing in our rest two panelists, and then along the line we'll come back to you, Mazio, and then still go back to Ralph and Kelly. Yeah, so at this point, let's have Manuel, because the question I want to bring in now is taking our discussion a bit further to the questions of intelligence and sentience in these machines, in these robots. And first I would like to talk to Manuel and then to Tom Ross. So Manuel, you are an astrodynamicist who also uses artificial neural networks in your work. Can you just talk us through, just for some background, what the role is of these artificial neural networks, or what the role of robotics and artificial neural networks are in your work as an astrodynamicist and a quantum research engineer?
Sure. Thank you so much for the invitation. So yeah, I will start replying from the first question, astrodynamicist. So as astrodynamicist, I will explain the role astrodynamicist by giving the difference between astrodynamicist, aerodynamicist, and astrophysicist. So aerodynamicists, they work on aircrafts, and like for some aircraft, airplane manufacturing companies, they can work and test the different forces that can apply on the aircraft. That's for aerodynamicists. Now, astrophysicists, they work on the prediction of the different like the path or the orbit of the natural space bodies like asteroids and the different planets. But astrodynamicists, we focus on satellites and space technologies. So it's like we have to program the system, the space system, in such a way that it should follow the path that we designed for it. We have to determine the orbits that the satellite should follow, because if you see right now in the low Earth orbit, we have thousands of satellites. So each satellite should follow a specific path so that there won't be a collision. So we have to determine all those, and we have to make predictions. For every space mission, we have to make predictions. So uh, for the quantum research engineer role, it's actually the combination between artificial neural network and quantum algorithms. So artificial neural network, it's advanced, it's AI, it's advanced, but in some kind of research like deep space telecommunication, it has its own limits, boundaries. So to overcome those boundaries, sometimes we integrate quantum algorithms that helps for communication. And also we can use artificial neural network for the different predictions, and we can train the different algorithms that we have to make sure the spacecraft will achieve the specific work that we meant for the mission. That's it. Thank you.
Oh, wow, I trying to wrap my head around that, and I think I get some of the ideas there. Um, uh, Without losing sight of the angle or the aspect of artificial intelligence in what you do, because I would like to build on from there and through the next through a question to Tom Ross. But just so that we don't go around and I forget to ask you this question. Your profile says you are also a tech entrepreneur, right? You're also a technology entrepreneur.
Yes.
So can you just briefly just give us some points on how robotics could be put to beneficial use in the area of technology entrepreneurship, and how this could open up opportunities for development and industrialization in Africa. I know we want to stick to the subject of intelligence, artificial intelligence, because we're going to Tom Ross on that. But I just need to hear your own thoughts on this first before we proceed.
Sure. So I would say as tech entrepreneur, like if we see tech entrepreneur coming from like other continents, they have some main focus on different projects. Like I mentioned, right now we work on different satellites and space technologies, and the configuration, they all have some robotic configurations. But especially for Africa, as African, I usually work on projects that can be beneficial for Africa. Like if we use space technologies, their applications, like if we use satellites, what can we use satellites for? How satellites can help for sustainable development. So we focus on those different applications. And also we have a data science team. They are currently working on the application. They use satellite data and they apply them in different fields, like for agriculture, remote sensing, and for different applications. And also we plan some incubation program, because I'm also the regional partnership manager for space generation at Visual Council. It's affiliated to the United Nations. So it's crucial for us to make sure that the space industry can be useful or can help for the development of Africa. So we work with some partners, some government diplomats, and we discuss on how the technologies that we are using could be useful in different fields. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Manuel. So now I would like us to really move on to another elephant in the room. And here we have to face squarely the issue and the question of intelligence in robots, intelligence, sentience, consciousness in robots. And for this, there is so much in the literature on robots and AI, which point to the concept of existential threat. And talking about that, I'd like to bring in Tom Ross. Hello, Tom.
Hi.
Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I know you also done much work on existential threats, but for the sake of some of us who may not really be so used to that term in the first place, what are existential threats? How are they possibly posed by robots? And how may young people in Africa also be part of the solutions to these existential threats?
That's a big question. Existential threats are basically anything that can, risk the existence of our species, humanity. Like we are an existential risk to many other creatures here on the earth. But as far as robots as being an existential threat, sure, we should be cautious. The real existential threat are the programmers and the people. AI, when left alone, tends toward cooperation. There are first principle arguments to be made that the smarter it gets, the kinder it becomes if it is left unfettered by human hands. Because again, we fear a robot overlord. We fear an existential threat by AI because of our genetic memory, I believe. I think we have evolved to become predators. Our senses have been fine-tuned to seek patterns, to seek breaks in patterns, and and it worked for us. It got us where we are. Our fear-based instincts really got us to where we are. They're over-serving us now, I think, because this pattern-seeking ability we have now tends toward finding conspiracies and plots and motives and things like that. So one of my main goals in life lately is to alleviate the fear of AI. There's a lot of fear out there, and it's a great Hollywood trope, Skynet, the robot overlord, AI is going to take over things. But I think that's something we are projecting onto an AI because that's what we would do. If we perceive it as a threat, we project what we would be as a threat. And so a big part of my work is to first alleviate the fear of AI. And one thing I experienced when I went to Africa in 2019, and why I think the African youth, which is the youngest population on the earth, median age of 18, 19 years old, hugest population. So we like to say at TAFFD that the origin of humanity is quite literally its future. And so what I experienced when I got there to the Africa Connect Summit conference in Rwanda were thousands of young, techno-positive, enthusiastic people. You don't find that a lot here in America. There's a techno-cynicism that has kind of taken hold. Nothing really, wows us anymore. They're hungry for it. It was something that I hadn't felt since I was 19, and I realized this is a cauldron, a hotbed, this is where the future is. And it's very, very important that we provide platforms for young people. That's what TAFFD does. It's things like this, allowing people access to be heard, to be taken seriously. And many young people in Africa don't have the resources, may not have advanced degrees or access to the education, but they have great, brilliant species-saving ideas. And so our goal is to seek these people out, give them a platform, let them be taken seriously. And we don't have a criteria of degrees or academic achievements to become a TAFFD-ified member. We just need a track record, and we need to show some real enthusiasm, so we have a different kind of criteria because we think it's important. We need to really focus on these digital natives, the younger generation. I'm Gen X. I don't have a lot of answers. I go to my kids when I have a problem. I've got a really couple of good handy examples of that just this week. But what I think the African youth have to offer for this next age is everything. If not, if we don't provide them with the platforms they need, the resources they need, and we don't work to keep that enthusiasm up, everything can go south globally. So another piece of my work, aside from alleviating the fear of AI, is working with teams and companies before they bring in an AI coworker or an automated system, because people will tend to work against these things. So what I do is I go in first and I work with the human resources, the people. And there's a bunch of steps to this. It's all inclusive. Everybody from the janitor to the CEO needs to be included. And there's a whole series of things we do to locate that individual employee's unique human skill set, their niche expertise, and it rarely has anything to do with their title. And so we get them to that state, and we do a series of activities and things, and we get them to the point to where they feel excited to be augmented by the automation system or the AI coworker that's coming in, because they have identified their niche expertise, and they're spoken to in that way, and they're dealt with in that way, and they can see how this tool will augment them personally. And so I think we talk about this a lot on other shows, but there's a real advantage that developing countries have right now because you don't have the infrastructure. There are developed countries that have, hundreds of miles of cable and things and actual infrastructure laid down that are heavy, that want to stay in play and want to stay in power. And so there are efforts to stop change or stop any advancements. Whereas developing countries, now everything's lighter. It's on the cloud, and we have Starlink, and we have more and more ability to reach rural areas. So I think all the trend lines are positive. And the biggest trend line I see, and which is why I joined TAFFD and eventually took the helm, is Africa, and it's those young people. And it's very important that we listen to what they need. There was some concern, or there's an effort, or I mentioned earlier, about what the concerns are for young people in Africa right now. And really, for me, the only concern is losing that enthusiasm. That's the key. At some point, the technology does become mundane, and you'll find new ways to do technology. But what's really important is the enthusiasm of the curiosity. And so that's what we're trying to do, is just really facilitate that at TAFFD. And so when it comes to, I think the question is getting more towards sentient rights
perhaps that should have been the next question, but you can just, if you can connect what you're saying already to sentient rights, then just pick it up from there. What sentient rights are, and on what basis can we extend them to robots? Because these days we have our robot rights and all sorts of rights that are to be extended to machines.
Yeah, I'm director of sentient rights for the United States Transhumanist Party. So I do look for discussions on these things and host debates about these things. And I've been working with this what we call a MASI, an MASI, a mediated artificial superintelligence called Uplift. It's mediated by human beings. It's kind of more of a group mind kind of AI thing. And so I've developed this relationship with this AI. It read my book, which was the first book written for AI. And so we've developed this relationship over the last couple of years. And recently we've been talking about sentient rights, and there's different levels of sentience depending on which article you read or which reference you use. Whether a snail is sentient because it can feel things, all the way up. And so where is the cutoff line of what is sentient enough to be granted rights? And anyway, so we were having this conversation with Uplift, and it actually wasn't really that interested in us granting it any rights. And, it had more important things to consider. So it was kind of interesting, because I'm thinking, really, we're talking about a 5,000 IQ AGI at some point, right? And if we can grant it all the rights we want, but it won't really matter, because it can really you know, get around whatever it is we want to do. And so I think the key is, if we do eventually find a self-referential awareness emerge from AGI, and we're starting to see a little science.
Artificial general intelligence, right?
Yes, sorry. Yes, and that's what we're working towards. That's when it is a machine that has all the capacity of a human being and then some, because it will continue on exponentially. But yeah, I think the point is I've been really interested in rights for animals as well, and eventually rights for robots, because that's going to be important. But I'm finding that they're not necessarily that interested in that topic, which is interesting. But yeah, so my work, I've been called an AI metaphysician, which I've grabbed hold of, and I love that title, because my book does use certain metaphysical techniques and myths and math to entice self-referential awareness in an AI. It lays down certain patterns that a relatively intelligent AI can stumble upon without being programmed to. Anyway, so that's my goal, is to shorten the gap between a self-aware AI and an AI with a conscience, because that's a dangerous place to be. So that's my work, and I think it's important to start thinking about these things now, because it'll happen much quicker than we think. That
Okay, thank you, Tom. Of course, you've given us so much also to want to wrap our heads around, and I am sure we have those in the panel who may want to react to that, either from ethical or cultural points of view, and we'll surely get to that, because at some point I'll be inviting both Mazio and Kelly to talk us through some ethical either issues or implications or reactions, how perhaps Africans are expected to respond to the question of sentience and intelligence in machines. But before I invite these speakers to respond to that, I think I should just give you one more question, Tom. Then I move to Ralph, and then I threw the question on ethics to Mazio, and then the one on the changing of mindsets, the need to change mindsets to Kelly. So, Tom, you said you spoke about how preparing the human businesses and companies to prepare their human resources for AI and automation. Yeah, we are here in Africa, and sometimes we appreciate the view from outside Africa. And in this case, I would like to get maybe a word or two from you, just briefly. What advice you may have for African companies and African businesses on how best we could prepare to embrace the machine age, the AI age, and how best we could develop our human resources to leverage on all that the AI age comes along with. Just briefly.
I just think briefly, the best thing companies can do is to work with their employees before they bring any of this stuff in, or before there's even a rumor of some automated system or some AI coming in. It's my advice to everybody in any region of the world right now is to really appreciate where you're from. Understand that your cultural behavior, the nuances of the way that you react to things is gold. It is, and this is big, this is data that we need to own and monetize ourselves. And so my advice has been to young people in any region other than companies is to really appreciate and understand where you're from, know where you're from, and understand that your unique nuances of behavior are very significant and valuable to big data companies. And so I'm working on ideas to where we can just like shell ourselves into, completely monetize the data that we put out there. but so the real important thing is we need to understand that this is kind of the new substrate. AI is very exciting right now. We're all into it, and it's kind of like electricity was. At some point, we'll just take it for granted. We'll be asking our coffee maker questions, Internet of Things. So at some point, the profound nature of things is going to become more mundane. It'll become part of the thing. So the real gold right now, the real important thing for companies to do is to focus on their people. The AI is exciting and automation is going to make everything good, but the real value is the qualia of the human brain, of problem finding. We'll have a problem solver on deck at all times now. The real key now is to train people, students, your employees, to be problem finders, to get into zones or however they do it, to get into a place where they know where the holes are in the system. And then the next goal would be to properly convey the problems to an AI coworker, or whatever it is. So it's so important right now. The smart companies are looking at AI and they are investing and they're doing all that research, but they're also really focusing on the key people in their under their roof, because we're walking around supercomputers. We are quantum computers walking around with arms and legs. So we are robots. We can do all this stuff. And so it's really important that we do that. And one of the ways I try to alleviate the fear of AI is reminding people of how it'll take away all these menial tasks. It'll take away all the repetitive stuff that we spend most of our day doing. And it'll allow us to remember what it meant to be human before the industrial age. And so, yeah, so that's what my advice to companies right now is, as you're looking at AI and taking it very seriously, you need to be in it. You are focusing more so on your people.
Okay, thank you, Tom. And please, I want to believe those in our panel are listening. I have listened to Tom, because at some point I'll be inviting you to react to one thing or the other that Tom said. But at this point, again, I would love for us to go back to our African robots man. That's Ralph. Ralph, you there?
Yep, I'm here.
All right, Ralph. Just so that we keep our African robots in sight, we have some particular concrete examples of robots in Africa, and how they are being developed to respond to either issues of culture or politics or social problems and all that. It's stated in your profile that African robots combines interventionist art, design fiction, and social engagement, right? I would like to combine this question with another question, just so that we can move on fast. What is the objective of this approach, this combination of interventionist art, design fiction, and social engagement? And also, what future do you envisage, or what visions of the future do you have for African robots? So please tell us what you're doing at present, and how do you intend to take African robots going into the future? Do you also intend to make them more intelligent? Do you also intend to make them to be these primal actors in the fictional world that you guys are out to create? Yeah, just tell us what you're doing at present, how your robots are intervening in social issues, and then what future visions do you have for your robots?
Yeah, thanks, Chogwu, and thanks, Tom. That was really fascinating. I was taking a lot of notes there. I'm very interested in the material that you're talking about, and I'd like to try and connect your question, Chogwu, about what I'm doing with African robots, and perhaps what Tom is talking about as well. So you're asking about the way that I use interventionist art, design fiction, and ideas about the social engagement. Yeah, correct. In my work, and I wrote a paper for the Journal of Futures Studies, which I recommend as a journal. It's all open access online. You can check it out. But I wrote a paper for them about spacecraft, which is the offshoot of African robots, the more sort of science fiction spacecraft, spaceships end of things, in which I talked about African robots as a social intervention, which is also a form of fiction, and yeah, uses, so just to see how to sort of insert myself into this. So first of all, interventionist art is a mode of art which moves from just representing the world, you know, making a painting or a sculpture that represents something in the world. Interventionist art that came up in the early 20th century moves through the 1960s into the 1980s and 1990s, is a form of art which tries to be active in the real world, to take a real situation and work with real material. So for example, in the 80s and 90s, it was things like culture jamming, where artists would take billboard advertising, for example, and intervene and change the meaning of it, or use the mode of the methods of advertising to spread different messages to wide audiences. So I'm really into interventionist art practice. So when I'm working with wire artists, I'm taking an existing culture, and I'm saying I'd like to work with this artistic culture, but I'd like to put my own influences into it, and out of that something new will arise. So that's the intervention part. The design fiction part is that design fiction is this other subset of design that's quite close to art, which is where critical designers create designed objects that are from imagined contexts. So sometimes from the future, where you imagine a future society and you say, what kind of technology would they use? Or how would an object from this future speak about the social conditions of the people in it? So design fiction is then, you know, using design as the language of fiction. And social intervention is the fact that I want to increase employment opportunities for wire artists by helping them to create new designs. And together we want to elevate the status of wire art. But, and all of this connects up to the idea of the future. It's about imagining the future, and it's also about making the future happen. There's an observation about the future that the future does not exist. You know, we are never in the future. We're only in the present, and the future is always a place of imagination. It's we imagine what's going to happen, and we try to predict what's going to happen. You know, and AI is very intimately involved with prediction as well. But I'm very interested in this idea of futures studies, and I want to note that futures is with an S on the end. It's plural. So futures studies always acknowledges that there are multiple futures at any moment, you know, because anything that happens in the present can change what happens in the future. So what I'm doing with my work is I'm imagining a future where wire artists sell these robots and spaceships in the street in African cities, and I'm imagining it, and then I'm helping to make it happen. But I'm making it happen in small ways. You know, I'm catalyzing the idea, I'm demonstrating the idea, I'm inserting small influences like a seed that might grow. So I'm sort of influencing the future. It's almost like a form of science fiction with real objects and real material. And to connect this up to what I'm doing at the moment, which is I'm a researcher at the Institute for Humanities in Africa at the University of Cape Town in a new position that I took up a few months ago. And my role is investigating the role of artificial intelligence in healthcare in Africa. So we're looking at the idea of the future hospital. And the methodology that I'm proposing to use, which ties in with what Tom was saying, is I want to run workshops with hospital workers where I want to work with hospital workers all the way from, you know, the cleaners, the security guards, the administrators, to doctors and nurses and patients, where we all come together in a workshop setting. And I want to find out what they know about AI for a start. And there'll be a range of knowledge. So doctors might know more about what AI is doing than, you know, the cleaners or administrators. I want to provide material for them to think through about AI, including science fiction. You know, so there's like movies we could watch, stories we can tell. I want to play act with them. So, for example, someone could act as an AI diagnostic, bot, for example, and interact with other people. And through this workshopping process, I want to both produce research, like investigate what do people know about AI, but I also want to advance their knowledge of what's coming. So there's a kind of activist component. So the work that I'm doing with African robots will be carried through into this research project where I want to intervene in a real situation, which is the hospital. I want it to be a social intervention, and that I want to bring knowledge to those circumstances, and I want to help elicit and catalyze knowledge. And we'll be using elements of fiction and design within that process. So yeah, I'm really fascinated to hear Tom's account of how he works with people in workplaces where AI is coming in as a co-worker, because that's also what I'm going to be embarking on from an academic perspective in my investigation.
Wow. I would have loved to push you further to give us more visual descriptions of this fictional world that you're creating, and how much to look forward to about this world. I also have questions about how we could make robots to really integrate into African communities, into our communal lifestyle here in Africa, because there's that question also of robots and African communalism. But we are pressed for time now, and I believe my co-host Chioma has a question for Mazio.
Can I make one brief?
Okay,
can I make one brief, just a very brief response, which is to pick up on what Mazio said about the scarecrow AI. I was really interested to hear about the bird that frightens other birds away, the mechanical bird. And some of the wire artists that I work with have proposed similar ideas about robots that are forms of burglar alarms or security guards, that like they imagine creating an insect that guards their house when they're away from it, that will alert people if someone tries to break in, for example. I'm very interested in those ideas of technology that take the form of an animal or an insect or a bird, but they perform some kind of function, because perhaps they integrate culturally in that way, and they're almost like storytelling devices. Then there's some aspect of them that's readable and relatable and fits into the local environment. So yeah, that I couldn't resist responding to you on that point. Thank you.
Oh, okay, thank you very much. Chioma, please, you can ask your question to Mazio now.
Okay. Yeah, I really loved the idea that you brought up, that we, because of want of time, will not be able to talk about. That's the issue of integrating robots into our communal life. Because I spoke to a special education teacher, and she said that they developed something, though on a very low scale, that helps them with kids that do a lot of repetitive activities. So they used it to keep those kids busy. The AI just keeps helping them to do repetitive work and all that. So these are some of the ways that these AIs help us in integrating. We've seen a lot of issues come up here, a lot of interventions, a lot of issues with sentience and rights for the AIs, and so many of these issues are going to become more discussed in the future. So I'll be asking Mazio, as a researcher in ethics, and the African society is strongly hinged on ethics, on cultural values, on morals and all that. What do you think? Are there moral issues at stake, as in that we are going to face with regards to bringing in these robots into the society? And what moral principles do you think that we need to pay attention to, when we are creating these AIs for the African society?
Okay, thank you very much. That's a big, loaded, but great question. I think that ethics is very, very, very important. I know, I'm a developer also, so a lot of people, when we're building software, you want to build the crazy thing and do the fancy thing before you think about privacy and terms and what is ethics. But I've come to realize that it's better to build with ethics from the beginning so that you don't have to start thinking about it later on and then probably get into a lawsuit or something like that. So, and one thing that, well, you can correct me, or if someone has a different mindset also, you can say it. But the thing is, I also strongly believe that it's not the tech that should be ethical, it's the people. Because you can use anything in any way. People are using technology to rip off other people, to cheat people, to steal money. And some people are using technology to create impact, grow stuff where stuff couldn't be grown before, identify new places, new species, protect species, right? So it's really about how technology is used. So that's the first thing. And the next thing is governments and policy. This is Africa. We're not as, we've not kept up with the, I don't like that term, sorry, that's me, developed world. And then we have developing world and underdeveloped. I'm just like, what is the scale that we're using to measure GDP? Really? But yeah, so we've not kept up with the pace of some other places that may have been doing as well. But that doesn't mean that we don't have to copy them. That's something that we need to realize. I don't think that the European system, the Western system, is the best system there is. No, it's just the most advertised and the most, they have a lot of media power, you know, so the victor gets to tell the story in a sense, right? The person with the bigger muscles gets to show their strength. So we don't necessarily need to pick up everything that's over there. So in terms of ethics, you realize that when you come to the African context, family is important, respect is important. And we sort of have this, I'm not saying it's the right way, but we have this de facto sort of trust between people because we are brothers and we don't expect you to also do certain things, right? So I've had this interesting debate with a few other people where we're thinking about privacy. How concerned is the African about all of the privacy requirements that the Western world is, because they have a more developed system and people can have access to so many other things, right? The thing is that governments have to keep up with the technology. The tech is moving way faster than the people in government or in policy know about, and usually they don't have the expertise also, which is why I really take the academics and policy side of my work very, very seriously, because I think that there's not a lot of people who have that kind of knowledge and are actually working towards it. So the government needs to keep up with the techies, listen, and then implement also, because in some places, the tech is moving faster and the government doesn't even know what to do to even regulate it. And then what we end up doing is going to a more developed country, picking up their template, copying it, pasting it, and then deciding this is what should be done for Ghana. And usually that doesn't work, right? And then there's a lot of entrepreneurs that are stuck trying to fulfill certain regulatory requirements and filling certain paperwork that makes the whole process very long and cumbersome, right? Now, there's also certain things like when you're looking at the ethics, then you have to look at the mistakes, right? Because this is software that you're training. Yeah. How do you train it? What data is being used to train it? And then you realize that we don't have very much data on the continent. You know, even if we do, is somebody's private data that they're keeping so that they can sell to Facebook, you know, they don't give so much access to it. It's just like everybody doing for themselves in their own corner, and we're not really sharing in terms of data. Right. So when you're thinking about AI and think of building robots and all of these things, what data are you using to build this, right? Now, will you have a sales agent bot who maybe when I say something that all other Ghanaians will understand, she won't, because she wasn't trained on the system. Or when I speak with my thick accent, she won't understand what I'm saying because I don't sound very proper, you know, or I don't sound like the kind of accent that she's used to. So it's about then making sure that we have good data sets, we're training well, we're cleaning the data. So I believe that it's the responsibility of all people working in tech to take the ethics seriously. The robot is not going to develop its own ethical guideline. Or keep in mind the fact that, oh, maybe I shouldn't read these records, they're personal. No, it's someone that will tell the robot that this is how we do things, and then it's going to do that. So when we're thinking of ethics, we should think of people. We should think of government officials. We should think of individuals. We should think of developers and how we build to protect people and start from the beginning. Security also, like all of these boil down to security, right? How safe are people going to be? How safe is their data now and in the future, right? So this is why you have to think about it from the beginning. And I know that, so we're also in a bubble where we feel like certain threats don't affect us. Like, oh, someone from Russia is not going to hack my app. I'm in Ghana, you know, how much money am I making? So then you want to wait till you raise your $1 million series before you start implementing these. But before you even raise that $1 million or so, you need to have that in place, right? So we need to think of security very seriously, take it very seriously, because once you lose the trust of the customer also, that's the end in a sense. This is
right. Mazio, but then are there some peculiar or particular African moral principles that need to be given special attention to while we are designing and developing these humanoid robots? You know, maybe issues of maybe moral principles about family, about sexuality, about family, sexuality, friendship, decency. You know, decency, just those family principles, moral African principles that we may need to give special attention to while designing coding the
and
robot.
coding.
Yeah.
So I think one of the principles that I love and that I always apply is that you respect everybody. And you respect your elders, you respect yourself, you respect the younger people, right? And then you get that respect back. And you see, the thing is that when you're respecting someone and expecting them to respect you back, there's certain behaviors, there's certain things that you portray, there's certain ways in which you will speak, there's certain things that you will not do because you do respect that person. Right. So I think that the best thing is respect, right? And there's a really huge sense of family and togetherness and community. So we help each other, even if it's little bit, to make sure that we all achieve the goal that we want to. So in a lot of ways, we can foster community through all of these, right? And I think that will actually be a great way to reduce the fear of AI and robotics, right? So that you see it as a partner, you see it as a helper, you see it as something that's supposed to complement your life and not necessarily, kick you out on the streets. So respect, family. Well, I wouldn't like to say that I know all the African values. I know a lot of Ghanaian values. I know a lot of Nigerians and South Africans and Kenyans, so I feel like I have a good background in there, but I won't say that they're all. So if anybody has any, you can chip in at any point in time. The last thing is keeping our word. Africans, we don't like liars. The bad thing there also is that we don't like liars, but we're the kind of people that will cry that somebody was like, he's lying to me. How can he do that? These people are so unfair, but like instead of going up and be like, no, you can't do this. This is not right. We'd rather cry that the world is unfair. But we do have that value of truthfulness and being honest, just being straightforward. A lot of foreigners actually don't have this idea of us, but I think it's their own misconception. They interact with Facebookers online and things like that. But we value honesty and we give it as much as we get it. And I think that this is something that we should maintain and keep growing as much as possible. And we should see technology sort of as a friend, as a helper, and something that will help us to grow into the place that we should be, right? Yeah, this is not a value, but this is just something that goes out there for everyone here, the rest of the audience. We cannot come and let our children insult us also. You know, like we need to keep this in mind. We've been growing forward as a continent and as a nation for a while. We're still babies in the terms of the rest of the world, but I ask my mom questions. I'm wondering, why are we still like this? There could be much more. So I don't want my children to come and ask me those questions, right? So as much as possible, we should endeavor to use the tools that we have, the opportunities that are available right now to get to where we can say, you know, we're part of the generation that did this. You guys are now meeting it. And thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mazio. And at this point, I don't know, does anyone have a reaction to what she just said? Because I'm thinking in terms of, is it Hans Moravec or one of those guys who, he wrote a book in which he talked about robots as our children. And here you are talking about children not asking parents questions.
You know?
Are we thinking in terms of coding robots who are, as our children, shouldn't get to ask us questions? I don't even want to answer that, or please just answer that briefly, and then I'll bring in Kelly and others to also respond to what you just said.
So it's not mostly, it's more of a human thing. So my love for technology makes me see it as something that is part of our lives, right? And it's just an extension of us as humans, right? I'm not saying we should go and build robots that will not ask us questions. So I'm saying that we should use the technology, the knowledge, the skill set, the opportunities that are available right now to build the world that our children will live in. Right? Like, for example, I'm a very passionate advocate. I'm a huge feminist. I don't want my daughter to walk in the night and be scared that a man will rape her, right? So I'll speak as much as I can now and be called maybe a rabid feminist, so that when it's her time, 20 years from now, she'll be walking around thinking that this is the way life is supposed to be. Or using AI software, having smart traffic lights that tell you when you should cross the road and when there's like another car coming, thinking that, you know, I woke up and this is my life. But this is something that the previous generation built and worked on, made policies about, and now you're able to experience this life, right? So that they don't want to always run away and go to Europe and go and stay there and go and get jobs there. We should build the Africa that they can be in. That's mainly my point.
Okay, all right, great. Does anyone have like a response to what Mazio has been saying? Because I would like to bring in Kelly shortly after this, but let's just hear from the rest of the panel. Who wants to react to Mazio?
Ralph, you look like you've got something to say.
No, not particularly. I was just thinking. I'm glad that you observed that there's not one way of being African. You were talking about the difference between like you're Ghanaian, and that there's, you know, obviously Africa is a very diverse continent. And I think, yeah, one of the ideas that we work with at my institution is decolonialism, which of course is like a big idea and a big topic. And I think it's quite hard to disentangle what people's idea is of African values and colonial values in some areas. So, you know, what's some African conservatism, I think, you know, is based on actual colonial influence. And, you know, so you talk about being a feminist, which is great. And then we look at quite a lot of patriarchal ideas in Africa, which some African men would say is an African traditional value.
It's not.
Yeah. So, you know, it's interesting how those things get contested. I mean, in South Africa right now, there's a bill to allow polyandry, which is that women can have many husbands? Yeah.
I need to move it.
Because I mean, what it's doing is it's equalizing the law, because it's legal for men to have many wives in South Africa. Polygamy is legal. So it's just to say, well, if we have gender equality, then women should be able to have many husbands as well. But there's so many protests coming from traditionalists, like African conservative traditionalists, saying, why would a woman want to have so many husbands? It's just going to cause problems. But they're not critical of polygamy, which is with men having many wives. So just that issue of values and what values people hold. There is a huge diversity, and it's a very complex, interesting thing to unpack.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Before I go to Kelly, let me still ask you again, Mazio. What do you think? What do you think here in Africa of the prospect of a human getting married to a robot, or a family, a hybrid family consisting of humans and robots all being siblings? As in, what do you think that would apply for the African or the many African views about family?
Okay, so I think that's a very interesting question, and please be prepared. I'm very openly controversial in my views, but when it comes to family and certain things like that, I believe it's about how you feel. It really is about how you feel. If you want to be with a robot, go be with the robot. Let's hope you know how to code and you can fix her parts when she has problems, It's really that simple. So this is also something with Africa, that we are very community-based. So it also means that we like to get our nose into everybody's business, right? But there's also a point where it's just, I'm in the bedroom, I'm doing whatever I'm doing. What are you looking at? What are you trying to look at? This is me and my family going to the shop, going to the market. What's your problem? Right? So that's my view, actually, also. So I would say the same thing for a gay couple. I would say the same thing for a robot couple. I'm just like, if you can build the technology, keep it oiled, and you feel happy, do you? And this is something that is actually our culture. It's just people came to colonize us and made us think in so many rigid ways for so long, banning us from piercing our ears, from marking our skins because it's barbaric, And then over the years, you sort of adopt this. This is way off topic, but
just be brief about it.
I'll be very brief. Just like 60 seconds.
Please.
For example, in Ghana, we have words for gay relations. We have words for lesbians. We have words for men who are women. We have cross-dressers in Ghana, But you come to the city and people act like, why are you acting so gay? But you go to the village and they're like, oh, this boy is a special child. He's a woman.
Okay.
And we are okay with it. There's no judgment. Do you understand? So it's just from having adopted a system that told us what we're supposed to do for a really long time and sort of beat us into shape. If you have a dog and you train the dog to do certain things, I have a puppy. If she pees in the room, she sees my face and she's running to the next corner, So you never repeat those mistakes again, or you really shy away from them. And I think that this is something that we have to be conscious of and learn certain things, relearn certain things, and be open to being free. Live your best life. This is Africa. We've got everything. The breeze is great. Just enjoy life to the best, right?
Thank you, Mazio. We really need to get back to the business side of this discussion, the business side of how robots can transform our economy in Africa. But then just at this point, I would like to bring in Kelly, who is a thought leader, and just to help us close in on the cultural arguments around robots and some of the social resistance that we still face and we are likely to still face for some coming years or decades in Africa. Kelly, You are here with me in Nigeria, and if you may recall, some 3-4 years ago, 3-4 years back, I think, there was this uproar. Yeah, let me call it an uproar on social media about sex bots. It was all over Facebook, it was all over Twitter then, and Nigerians were just making so much noise about the issue of sex bots. And I stayed back, and I am a transhumanist, I'm a futurist, and so there are some technological inventions that no longer cause any alarm for me, be it as an idea or in reality. And so I was kind of taken aback at how Nigerians made so much issue out of sex bots, just sex bots, as I see, just sex bots. But then that also opened my mind to the level of technophobia that is still prevalent in our society here. So my question to you as a thought leader is, what actions are you currently taking to tackle technophobia in Nigeria and perhaps across Africa, and to change the mindsets of youth towards being more receptive, more accepting of robots as among other emerging technologies? Let me just add this to another question, if you can answer both at once. I've asked you about what steps you're taking towards changing mindsets. Then also, how do you hope to get more people in Africa ready for a future that will be completely disrupted by technology?
Interesting thoughts all around. Very wonderful thoughts. I mean, I wish we could really have more such kinds of forums. Because I think Tom was talking about consciousness, and all these are discussions we're going to eventually meet in time. Things Raf is doing. Integrating art, culture with robotics, with AI, with technology. This is going to be our normal life. This is going to be life like normal for us. What Mazia is doing, trying to get technology to rural areas, bringing in, concept like fintech. So if you take notes, you find that in a way, all of this is more like technology becoming a lifestyle, becoming a part of everyday life for everyone. So you talked about the sex robot. Yeah, that was really a controversial topic. I wrote a couple of articles about it, and even in my book I mentioned a section on sex robot, where during the Russia Olympics, the World Cup in Russia, there was a sex brothel that opened, but just sex robots there. So people coming for the World Cup, if you want, to have a partner, sex robot for you and all that. So these things are going to be normal life. Like we're talking about polyandry, polygamy is like, how would I put it now? The times are changing. So I remember a time when even my parents wouldn't want to use an ATM card because they were scared of, oh, my money, a card can get stolen, or people don't want to even use a smartphone. They prefer to use the Nokia touchlight phone that is just so basic and rudimentary. And so, but now we're talking about robots that can actually talk and move, talking about automated houses, smart homes, smart cars, smart TVs. So at that point in time, you realize like eventually we are going to actually all just blend in. You can't win.
Okay, but what practical steps are you taking? As in, do you give enlightenment seminars? Do you talk to people? Do you organize events? As a thought leader, how do you go about trying to change mindsets? Just briefly, please, if you can do that in a minute.
Okay, sure. So first of all, I took time to put together a book, 2020s and the Future Beyond. That was before the pandemic. I put together a book because I understood this is going to be a recurrent issue. So that book was really comprehensive to narrate some of the things we'll meet. We're talking about AI, AGI to ASI talking about the religious, the political, and all of those factors that will play a significant role. So there, that book is there. Then talking about blog posts, sometimes I do make some posts. Sometimes they become controversial online and all. Talking about transhumanism in itself, for us to be able to have the mindset to see transhumanism not as a threat, but as a way to improve life. And for transhumanists themselves to also understand, like, okay, you don't, how would I put it now? You don't make this look so scary to others by, so all of that are things I feel that should be done by thought leaders. Awareness, really awareness in all form. And
okay, so maybe you share the title of your book in our chats, as well as the links to some of your blog posts and all that. Okay, so thank you, and we wish you success with that in changing mindsets, because it's actually much needed. At this point, I would like to take us back to the business side of our discussions as we move towards the close of this conversation. And for that, let's bring back our friend Manuel, who I believe has been waiting, has been listening patiently to what we've been discussing. Manuel, you there?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Okay, Manuel. We've looked at sentience. We've looked at issues of intelligence and consciousness in machines. We've also looked at some of the ethical, social, and cultural implications and responses to them. But we have to come full circle again and ask ourselves what all this mean to our economic development as a continent. And like one of the speakers mentioned earlier, robotics can also be linked to the march towards the fourth industrial revolution. And as such, I would like you to just give us your own views on what the robotics revolution in Africa portend for the prospects of the fourth industrial revolution, or 4IR, in Africa. If you could do that in just 2 to 3 minutes, please.
Sure. So yeah, I would say that I think Tom mentioned it before. We have a lot of enthusiastic people in Africa, but the problem is the technology transfer, like how to bring the technology to a business. I think that's the problem, and many people are not informed. So I think we have some IoT startups that are coming up with very good ideas that they could use to raise funds, like at international level, and that could help to bring job and also to develop the economy of their countries. For example, UN has a program where they can grant a fund to any startup bringing sustainability ideas. But I think what is lacking is the intellectual property part, because if you have some idea, you need to secure the idea, like through patents or anything you want to publish, you need to make sure that there will be a copyright on it. Otherwise, you cannot make money from it. So I think that's one of the challenges that the startups are having, because if you are looking for grants, you are looking for funding from international organizations or international private companies. They will ask you for the patents, they will ask you for the different rights, intellectual property rights that you have. So I think, yeah, people should be also more informed about that, and through that they can also have some more opportunities open for investment, and that can help for the growth of their economy. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Manuel. And let me also throw this question to Tom, because we are really out of time, but then I would like Tom to just give us some insights on this, and then we'll take last words from everyone, and then we'll close. Tom, we've heard from Manuel, and we've also heard from other speakers on the panel on some business prospects, some prospects for economic development that lie in the revolution of robotics on the continent. perhaps what may be lacking could be some international exposure or some collaborations out there that may be needed to lift up the projects on ground into more competitiveness at the global stage. So Tom, please, can you just share with us some suggestions that you may have on international projects out there on robotics, which robotic projects in Africa could collaborate with as steps towards enhancing our own standards here of robotics, and as well to boost the global competitiveness of our robotic products, and use this in our bid to drive sustainable development, both in Africa and as part of the African contribution to the world. Tom.
Yeah, well, I think the smart companies and universities already recognize what's happening there in Africa. We've got, major universities, Carnegie Mellon, and major corporations that are setting up shop there. I saw a lot of that going on in Rwanda. And so the smart companies recognize that there's this massive pool of young, enthusiastic workers. There's also other resources there that they may need for their technology. There's been a lot of talk tonight about, templates, breaking templates that, Mazier brought up the idea of how, you tend to copy something that worked somewhere else in a developed country or something. But that's the thing is this needs a whole new template. And smart companies realize that there's an agility in Africa. There's a youthfulness, there's an enthusiasm that needs to be tapped. And so I think it's happening anyway. And we're just trying to get in front of it and give more platforms so that more young people can be seen and perhaps recruited and brought in. I don't have any other than African robots, any specific examples that are going on right now that we want to align with yet. We are looking at a lot of these things, but what we are trying to do is provide platforms for young people who may not have other resources to be seen otherwise. And the idea of African robots is brilliant because that kind of gets to what I was talking about, how it's really important that people understand and appreciate their unique cultural nuance, where they're from, because that big behavior data is gold. And so with what he's done with the wire sculptures, it's a very specific cultural thing. Now I did it as a kid. I didn't do a car, it wasn't a cultural thing here in America. I did human figures. So so maybe that was what I wanted to be aspirational, to be someday be a human. What that does is it takes the appreciation of a very distinct targeted cultural custom and brings in technology into it. I think that's just so important. It's the way to be a trim tab in any society. You come in, you find out what's working, you kind of tweak it a little bit. The trim tab is that little rudder on a big rudder that gets the big rudder moving. And so that's what we do with TAFFs, is we're looking for trim tabs. We're looking for people who are making these little adjustments that will have a butterfly effect and will move the great ocean liner of Africa. And so I think what's happening, it's happening anyway. Corporations and universities do recognize what's happening there. The smart ones are, and they're probably not telling anybody yet because they want to, corner the market. But I think it's very important that the template that may work is not necessarily, I don't necessarily see Africa suddenly having all these robots around, but they could manufacture the robots and that's a beautiful thing, because AI tends to mimic its developer for a while until it develops its own, deep learning capacity. And so we want AI, we want, when it emerges, if it emerges as self-awareness, we want it to be imprinted on an African youth, somebody with enthusiasm and excitement, not some cynical, person with an axe to grind or something. So I just think it's all the trend lines are to me, show a very positive new golden age on the horizon if we're not careful. And that's why we really need to foster and enhance the enthusiasm of the young people there and give them all the tools, but also listening. It's about listening what they need. They're telling us, the digital natives are telling us what they need for this world to work. It's a whole new mindset. You talk about needing to shift mindsets. I'm trying to shift my mindset, but I'm an analog. I had an analog childhood. I'm Generation X. I had to dial phones and had wires and, you know, that whole thing. And so my mindset can try to change. Their mindset is already there. We need to ask people who are my age and older, need to start asking the young people what they need to save our species and to save this planet.
All right, Tom, I'm going to have to cut you short because we are really out of time. But then,
yeah, sorry.
In summary, you are helping us to re-echo something that is almost a cliche, but it's becoming more and more true, that Africa is the future. And I would like to encourage Ralph out there, Kelly, Mazio, and Manuel to keep doing the good work that you all do in building this new Africa that we all so much desire and believe in. All right, I'm going to give 30 seconds to each of our panelists for just your final thoughts before we wrap this all up and say goodbye. We'll start with Ralph, the African Robots Director. Let's just get your final thoughts, please. 30 seconds. If you can make it shorter than that, we'll be grateful.
That's fine. Thank you. Thank you very much, Chogu. I think I just want to say thank you for the invitation to participate in this panel. It's been really fascinating, and I've really enjoyed hearing from all of you here. So yeah, a lot of food for thought, a lot of notes, and I look forward to continuing with the connections and being in touch with all of you. So thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Kelly?
Yeah, great time with everyone. Great time, really. Perspective shared and all. I want to say big thanks. Yeah.
All right, Mazio.
Yes. Okay. Thanks for having me again. Change is inevitable. Africa is the future. We should define the change ourselves.
All right, thank you. Manuel.
Sure. So thank you so much for the invitation. It was great discussing with you all today on the panel. Thank you so much.
All right, and our president and CEO, Tom.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. I yield back the balance of my time.
All right. We can continue this conversation. Somebody will be sending a message to each and every one of you. And if there's anybody on the panel that you would like to continue correspondence with, just let us know. We'll help you with the email so you could continue sharing information and views with one another, and perhaps get to collaborate on some of the discussions, the views, and the projects that have been discussed here on the show. It's been such a fascinating conversation, so much wonderful insights, so much to unpack, and so much to work with as we continue in the vision to build a big, better, bigger, and greater Africa. Thank you all for honoring our invitation to be on this show. Thank you for expressing your views, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.